Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spark EC Voices podcast, the place where knowledge meets action and early childhood education.
We're so glad you're here. This show is brought to you by the Spark EC Hub, and that's the California State University system-wide partnership for advancing research and knowledge in early childhood education.
Today, we're excited to bring together a panel of educators and leaders from CSU campuses whose PK-3 early childhood education programs are just getting started here in California.
These programs represent a major shift, one that centers developmentally informed, play-based, literacy, and math-rich learning from transitional kindergarten through third grade.
And just as importantly, they open new pathways for a diverse and experienced early childhood workforce, creating opportunities for professional growth, stronger preparation, and greater equity across the field.
In today's conversation, we'll hear directly from our panelists about what it takes to launch a PK-3 program, who and how they are recruiting, and what it means in this moment for children, families, and educators across the state, including the difference between the PK-3 credential and the multiple subjects credential.
So, whether you're faculty, a teacher, a program leader, or simply curious about the future of early learning in California, we're glad you're here.
Let's get started.
So if we could each give a program snapshot, so just like a really brief overview of a picture of your program, such as how many candidates you have enrolled, maybe some of their backgrounds, like who are your candidates, how many have received equivalencies, and are there any unique features about how it's structured?
For this question, we're going to begin with CSU Dominguez Hills with Dr. Jenny Chiappe. Then we'll move to CSU Long Beach to hear from Dr. Ruth Piker and Dr. Ara Perez-Gonzalez. And then we'll hear from Fresno State folks, Dr. Peng Wu and Dr. Lindsay Meeker.
Our program is a 3-semester sequence, and so the first semester it's pre-service. There are no clinical hours attached to that semester. The reason why we did that was because it is across departments, and it's really hard to manage across departments. So the students don't start their clinical practice until semester 2 and 3, and it is a 200-400 hours split unless they have equivalency, or they do 200 hours minimum, and then they do the other 200 plus whatever remaining they have. But we are letting candidates know that it's probably most likely be more than like 200 hours because of those additional requirements. We have a lot of candidates who've come back, who've worked as long-time preschool teachers. Some of them are fresh out of undergrad, and there are some who've been aides and things like that. What is special about our program that also has caused me a lot of headache is that I try to support all of our candidates who are current preschool teachers because they have to leave their job and take a leave of absence, which means that they have no health care, no insurance, no pay, right? And because of this economy, I don't want them to leave their job and not have anything to come back to, right? So we've worked it out with districts. I've worked with a lot of districts and a lot of principals so that they can student teach in their place of work so that they don't have to leave that first semester. Everyone that we've met with has agreed to that, and all their supervisors have agreed as long as we have a current MOU with them. What is hard is when our candidates are outside of the 25-mile radius of Dominguez Hills, and we can't accommodate that. So we have somebody who's from Chino Valley who drives 44 miles a day just to come to the Dominguez Hills, right? And so we try really hard, to schedule our classes like we said, but what becomes harder is that, a lot of preschool teachers don't get out of school until 5. And so we try to make it so that it's only one day a week where they have to leave early, right? So we stack their classes. But again, it becomes, it's really hard because you're trying to manage so many different needs. And at some point it becomes unsustainable, right? And so this is where now I'm reevaluating my program and saying, in the long run, when our funding runs out, how we're going to sustain this program at the English department.
Hi, I'm Ruth Piker, and so I coordinate the PK-3 credential in our teacher education department. So our program is a 3-semester program. The first 2 semesters are courses. We actually embed a lot of clinical practice hours. We have 180 that are actually embedded, and they have like either 10 or 20 hours in the class. So it's very specific to what that class is. So we provide that in terms of flexibility because that way they can actually figure out how they want to adjust those. Some of our hours can actually be modules. So we try to include modules in that because that actually does count towards their clinical practice hours. For the third semester, that's when they would use, that's full-time. Third semester, they would do student teaching. And that's actually where we're starting to find some challenges. Because ours is actually split into two. So the first 10 weeks of the semester is K-3 placement. And then the last 6 weeks is meant to be in either preschool or GK classroom. And that's about 200 hours. So our students that have equivalencies, they don't have to take that last 6 weeks. They don't have to worry about taking that particular street teaching. They just need to do the first 10 weeks, which is great, except that when it comes to supervisors and actually getting our college able to support that, then there's a lot of questions in terms of them having to leave their jobs for like 10 weeks and then also where to place that. And then, so that's a whole other issue. So we're trying to figure that out in terms of what's the best approach. So we're going to be looking at residencies and internships and see what works best. We have 2 cohorts right now. So we actually accepted 30 into full-time, which is 3 semesters, and 30 into the part-time. And so they're taking like 3 classes, 3 to 4 classes a semester. So our demographics, we have a nice range, actually. A lot of our students, like a third of our students are actually over the 40 and above. We only have maybe, I think it's like 20 to 15% that are like 20 to 25, and then 26 to 30 is like another like 10%, 20. So we actually have we have a really nice range in terms of the ages. We also have the demographics in terms of the ethnic and racial background. It's like 70% Latin, only 3% who identified as white Caucasian. We have 7% that identify as Black African American, but we have, I think it's like 13% that identify as Asian. Sorry, we just literally writing this paper right now, which is why I didn't have these numbers memorized. So we have a pretty diverse group. We also did a survey where we did our new student orientation and asked where they're all coming or if they're working, and they all work with children in some way. At least 95% of them work with either the preschool teachers, they're working with infants and toddlers, they're assistant teachers, or they're like assistant teachers in like a TP class shuttle. So I think it's really nice that we have this nice diversity. And I think what I'm also enjoying is that in the classes, they actually learn from each other. So the new teachers are really giving opportunity to learn from those that have experience teaching, especially those that have been teaching for like 10, 20 years. It's really nice to see how they're learning from each other and they can get experience. And so that's really like.
We originally admitted 29 candidates and 5 dropped, and we surveyed them to learn about the barriers. Some barriers are about child caring. They can manage the children's care schedule and also to the clinical practice. And others are related to the location, like they live too far away and they can't come to the places sites. So 22 of them hold BA in Child and Family Science or related field among 24, and which reflects strong preparation in child development and family studies. Others bring liberal studies major or other majors into the program, so it shows that they have some interdisciplinary foundations or early elementary foundations. And they, similar to what Jenny and Ruth shared, many of them have preschool experience. 3 are seasoned preschooling teacher with 6 or more years in the field. And the majority of the remaining candidates have worked in easy roles like paraprofessionals, intervention program staff, daycare educators, or volunteers. And our cohort also reflects rich cultural and linguistic diversity. Of 24, we have about 79% who speak a language other than English. And then regarding the clinical practice equivalency, we have 12 candidates who receive approved clinical practice equivalency hours in this cohort. And 3 candidates qualify for option 1 only, which is their experience as lead teacher in preschool. We have 8 candidates who qualify for option 2 only, which reflects practicum coursework hours verified by the instructor or department chair from community college or child and family science department. And we only have one candidate who qualifies for both. So she has sufficient evidence in both categories. So when we count candidate by each option they met, regardless of whether they qualify for both options, basically we have 4 candidates met criteria for what option 1, and 9 candidates met the criteria for option 2. So one challenge worth knowing is that the review and tracking of clinical practice equivalency has been extremely tedious and time consuming because each candidate is approved for a different number of hours, which means that during phase 1, where we require 176 clinical practice hours, we must individually calculate how many additional hours each candidate needs to complete for phase 1. And we need to monitor their progress, determine when they have officially met the phase 1 criteria. And this individualized tracking just adds significant administrative burden. But it's also essential to make sure accurate and equitable equivalency being implemented.
I think when we think about that clinical practice piece and then when the students come in with equivalency, something that we didn't expect. So many of them are working, like Jenny said, multiple jobs. And so thinking about how we structure our assignments so that they aren't all having big assignments at the same time for every class, and also being in clinical. So we've learned a lot about that, and we're now having like more often phase-like meetings to say, okay, coaches, what are you seeing in the field? Where are the stress points or pain points? Okay, instructors, what do you have coming up, and how can we help streamline some of that for the students?
All right, thank you. I think we're going to back up a little bit now and think about recruitment. And so how do you get the students, the candidates in your programs? And I'm going to combine a couple of the questions in this question here as well. So how are you intentionally recruiting and supporting a diverse pool of candidates to reflect linguistic and cultural diversity of California's early learners? And how many of the students come from community colleges and or the workforce? For this question, let's have CSU Long Beach begin with Dr. Aura Perez Gonzalez and Dr. Ruth Piker. Then we'll move over to CSU Dominguez Hills for Dr. Chiappe. And then we'll move down to Fresno with Dr. Wu and Dr. Meeker.
I just joined CSU Long Beach, so I should kind of contextualize that. But from what I've seen is that a lot of the students that we have in the program are coming from the master's program. So that's kind of like a nice gateway into the program. And also I think there's been a lot of intentionality in terms of workshops that were proposed when applications were due in order to help the candidates with their applications and how to write their narratives in order to get into the program. So I think Ruth and Christina have worked a lot behind the scenes to do that kind of work in order to really assure that candidates are even like prepared to submit their application. And so that's what I've seen so far. That sure Ruth can add more.
Yes. So what we did is we ended up submitting a successful application clinic. And so what we decided to do is on a Saturday, we ended up having someone from the writing center come in and talk about writing their personal statement. We had someone come in from financial aid who actually shared a video in terms of talking to students about financial aid and what are the resources on campus. We had someone else talk about how to actually like the logistics of submitting an application. A lot of the students there haven't been in school for a long time. So we had these offered. We also had someone who supports our students' organizations. So then we had it was like 15-minute blocks. And so there was someone who was talking to them about what are the different student organizations within our college that could support you, that they can become part of to help them throughout. And then the other thing I think that was really important is that we actually had a new student orientation before the semester started. So
we had told them when they were admitted that they had to attend. And so I think it was like 59 of them actually attended. And it was this opportunity, we actually mixed them, like the part-time and the full-time. We had them at tables, groups of 6. We talked about what the expectations were, what it was gonna look like, gonna go practice. But then we had them create this vision board in terms of what their goals are. And so they were able to like create a vision board, and we had like all kinds of materials for them to decorate it, and they got to share it with each other. And then we did like a gallery walk, so we just walked around and people could put post-it notes on it. And so it was really this way for them to meet each other, get to know each other, think about what they wanted from the program, so that when they actually attended their first class, they already recognized people. So I think that's really helpful. And like I said, we only lost 2, which is like really incredible, because the fact that the population is definitely very diverse. We have a lot of parents. We also had scholarship, as I mentioned, so everybody got something. And so we forced them to meet with a financial aid advisor. And so she was able to go through what were their options, what is the cost of living, and then how much money they were able to get. So there was a lot of advising and a lot of ways for them to build those relationships before they even got to the first class.
At Dominguez Hills, we're also a recipient of the Bomber Gift, and so we received $21 million. 17 million of those are going into scholarships. So each candidate automatically gets $5,000 when they start a program every semester for 3 semesters. We had, our interest list also going beforehand. So we did, right before we launched the program, we had a large interest list. We also have a districts partners collective where our dean partners with all of the districts in our local area, and so we've been talking about the development of the PK-3. A lot of them were involved, and so they have been a great recruitment partner, because we also target a lot of the preschools and just encouraging a lot of the preschool teachers and assistants who work there to earn their credential. There is a different pay scale for those who earn their credential depending on the district. So we have a lot of people returning from their work experience into back to school. We also intentionally recruit our undergrads. So we host undergrad fairs, we go into classrooms, and then we have a lot of like PK-3 events on our campus. And again, this is due to the extra funding that we have.
So we have a team of navigators who provide online informational session, and then once attendees they complete the interest survey, then we'll reach out to them for one-on-one advising session. And we also reach out to our community college partners to provide information session on their campus. So with Fresno City, we try to do that once a semester. And also for Clovis Community College, we also do that like once per semester. And lately we have been hosting tour for ROP high school students. This year we had almost 80 students who are in the teaching academy or pathway. So they came to visit us, and then we just share information about different majors, and then also this PK-3 Credential program. And then my colleague and I have been presenting at the conference, and we also got support from the Dean's office to reserve a booth to introduce different programs last fall and then this spring. But with the new budget situation, we no longer have the privilege to do that. But I can say those opportunities actually allow us to reach to diverse population.
Great, thank you. We're getting down to the end here, but I did have a couple of questions. We'll start with this one, we'll see where it goes, and maybe we have time for one more, or else I have another thought. So how does your program differ from a multiple subject credential program? And why are students selecting your program over multiple subjects? For this question, let's begin with the Fresno State team. Then we'll move to the Long Beach team, and then we'll finish with CSU Dominguez Hills. Thank you.
When we're talking to our candidates, we have had some candidates really weigh that, right? Like, do I want that multiple subject piece so that I'm more marketable, or do I want to stick with my passion and really follow that PK-3 credential pathway? And so when we're having those conversations with them, one piece I really have them think about is if you are placed in a 4th, 5th, 6th grade classroom, are you going to love that job? And if they say, no, I never want to teach past 3rd grade, or I only want to teach kindergarten and 1st grade, then I'm like, well, then in that case, right, the PK-3 is a protection for you in a way. So even though you might be harder to hire, the chances of you working in the age group that you want to be in is a better match. Because, you know, principals are saying to us, we don't want that narrowing component of PK-3, but we're also talking to our candidates about what do you really love to do? And then what can get you there and what can protect you from needing to teach in spaces where maybe you don't think you want to land yet. One thing we're noticing is that we have multiple subject candidates that went through our program, you know, a couple years ago or 5 years ago, and they have their units for TK. They are our mentor teachers now, and then we have our PK-3 students going into their classrooms. And so we're noticing that if they took their 24 units with us, they have like this play-based lens, and they're really able to kind of really collaborate with our PK-3 candidates. If they might have went somewhere else for their multiple subject, or maybe they didn't get their 24 units recently, then we're seeing where, oh, there's like a big professional difference between what does PK-3 do for children and families and where does the multiple subject sit. So we're playing with that as we think about who our mentor teachers are, who are our candidates, and how do we ensure that that play-based developmental appropriate lens comes through.
Yeah, we were just having this conversation in class, actually. We were talking about worksheets and how they're not developmentally appropriate. And so sometimes students see that when they're in their clinical practice sites, and then they're like, well, what if we see this? I'm like, well, you're pointing out exactly why we need this credential, right? So it's very different from multiple subjects, which is maybe what your mentor teacher has. And so talking to them about how we're really preparing them to be advocates for the profession, because we're really grounded in developmentally appropriate practices, play-based practices. And so how can we actually talk to our administrators, our principals, and our mentor teachers about what we know and how they're experts in this, right? And so I think that's really where the distinction is between PK-3 and multiple subjects.
So the thing about our students is that they're all preschool teachers. Most of them are preschool teachers, so they want to stay and they want to continue to teach preschool. They don't want to teach older grades. I hear that over and over again. They really want to stay with the younger group. So most of our candidates are already teaching younger children, and they just want to stay working with them. They don't want to go with the older grades. They don't want to teach 4th grade or 5th grade. They really just want to stay with the younger group. And so I think that's something that they really appreciate. They also appreciate the fact that it is play-based, that is constructivist, and that's kind of what the emphasis is. Another distinction between MSCP and our program right now is that we're trying to be more intentional of having the same instructors versus a multiple subject, because it's so much larger. Most of those instructors are actually part-time instructors. Most of them have been, continue to think about how they're going to teach. Really, it's still very didactic, not really play-based, and they don't have that particular lens. And so we've been really intentional about who we're hiring and who's actually teaching our classes, or as we're trying to. So I think that's another distinction between both programs.
Everything they said, but I won't repeat it. So I think one thing that we've been really intentional about is also making sure that we don't work in silos, right? So a lot of our classes are really integrated and really teaching students that we're not just teaching math, right? Or we're not teaching social studies, whatever it is. I think on the other end of it is also, working with districts and teaching them about what the PK-3 right is. So like reading with HR, reading with their superintendents and people who place them, and really, talking to them about what PK-3 is and what the difference is and those core values, right? And they still come up with but multiple subject is more marketable, right? So I think a lot of it is like on us and on our candidates to be able to teach, those outside what PK-3 is.
We have another guest in the room who I think might have a different or maybe the same perspective. So I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself and maybe give your response or your thoughts or reflections based on the conversation we just had.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah from Alameda County Office of Education, and I came from HR. So this question about is HR considering the PK-3 credential, it actually lit my fire because we serve CDC sites. And our teachers in those programs, longtime preschool teachers, CDC teachers, could not get an administrative job because the child development permanent matrix wasn't eligible for the administrative services credential. So I just want to add to the mix that a person can love PK and never access leadership opportunities. And so that's also maybe a recruitment strategy here. That's what I wanted to add from the HR lens.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we have so many more questions. I mean, I've tried to categorize them. I'll just tell you, I have multiple subject PK, school district and partnerships and developing those. Basically program structures, but about TPEs, TPAs, equivalencies, and innovations, joys, challenges, and then the student perspective or how we support students. And then I too had more questions of how we can kind of keep these questions alive and going, because I think a lot of people have these questions and more. And it's part of our responsibility, our advocacy of being early childhood education professionals to help others understand this important work we're all doing. So I really want to thank all of our panelists, Dr. Chiappe, Dr. Rick Piker, Dr. Ora Perez, Dr. Lindsay Meeker, and Dr. Pei Wu. Thank you very much. Well, that wraps up today's conversation. We heard from our panelists about what it really takes to launch a PK-3 program.
They also helped clarify the difference between the PK-3 Early Childhood Education Credential and the Multiple Subject Credential, an important distinction as the California TK for All initiative grows statewide.
If you'd like to learn more, be sure to check out our video, Preparing PK-3 Educators for Tomorrow, and our ECE PK-3 Playbook. Both are available on our website.
And join the movement to transform early learning through collaboration and innovation, because every idea starts with a spark.